Hi everyone, this is Ricky Spencer as part of our Voices Sociology of Media Bites series, and today we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming one of the most extraordinary women whom I admire, and it's Dr. Susan Carland. Welcome, Dr. Susan Carland, to our
Thank you.
Lovely. So I'm just going to now read a bit about Dr. Susan Carland so all our viewers can get familiar with all your wonderful achievements. Dr. Susan Carland is an academic, writer and social commentator. She completed her PhD at Monash University's School of Political and Social Inquiry and is now the director of the Bachelor of Global Studies. She was awarded a Churchill Fellowship for 2020 and an ARC Discovery Early Career Researcher Award in 2020. Susan's first monograph, Fighting Islam, was published by Melbourne University Publishing in 2017, and the research process, co-authored with Professor Gary Boomer, was also published in 2016 by Oxford University Press. Her writing has appeared in local and international newspapers, academic journals, book magazines, websites, and anthologies. She is the host of the podcast, What Happens Next? Susan was invited to present her research at the UN in Geneva, has been named on the 500 most influential Muslims in the world's list, and the Age's 20 most influential Australian female voices. Wow, what an accomplishment. Dr. Susan Carland, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. So maybe tell us a bit about your journey into the realm of academia and what inspired you to take the path that you have chosen.
It was never really, I'm never someone who has like a 5-year plan. I think that's important to stay. So I think when I finished year 12, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I decided to enroll in an arts degree and a science degree because it seemed like the most general type of degrees, like the most general combination you could have. I didn't know what could be more wide-ranging than that. And my hope was that as I went along, in those 2 degrees, perhaps I would work out what I wanted to do. But all I realized was that I loved arts and I loved science and I loved studying. I realized that I was just a really curious mind that liked asking lots of questions. I liked being proven wrong. I find that quite exhilarating. And so when I finished my degrees, I thought maybe I'd like to do honours. And so I did my honours degree and I really enjoyed that. And so I did my PhD and I really enjoyed that. And I guess I've just never really left university because it sort of fulfills my desire to sniff out questions and then try to find the answers to those questions. I like it when we come across a problem and we say, we don't really know why it's that way, or we don't really know how to fix that. I find that quite exciting.
Wonderful. And what sort of led you to your area of specialization?
Well, I loved sociology. I loved doing sociology at uni. And I had some great lecturers and tutors, which I think makes a big difference. I just love thinking about the problems, well, not just the problems, but also the great things that are happening in society and the patterns. I loved looking at I loved looking at data. I loved it when the census would come out. I would find that really exciting to see, well, what is happening in this nation? What does this tell us? What are the movements of people and attitudes? How are they changing? And if they're not changing, why? All those sort of things. And so I think I loved the science and the art of sociology. And I guess it also felt like a really great place for me to investigate some of the personal questions I had. So someone explained to me that research really needs to be me-search. It helps if you have a personal investment in the thing that you're researching, particularly if you're doing it for a long time. So if you're doing your honours research or your PhD or master's, it helps if you have a personal investment. You certainly don't have to, but it helps just to stick with it and to keep wanting to turn over rocks in that field. And so I think, both my honours and my PhD were looking at different aspects of sexism and Muslim women and the many different intersections and fields of that. But also, I think, just from a pragmatic point of view, these were also things that I was just constantly being asked about, and asked in a way that I had to defend myself. So I wanted to sort of arm myself with information as well. So from a personal protective point of view as well, I guess I was like, I need to find out some of the answers to this. So I think that was part of it too.
And just on that sort of area of women and power, how have you sort of examined what's happening at the moment in the politics in Australia in terms of women and the kind of the ongoing experiences that they're encountering in Parliament? Do you see that there is a need for a change, and are women still kind of being regarded as some sort of second-class politician, or having to prove themselves more so than, I guess, cisgendered men who are in these positions?
I think there is definitely a need for a change. And I think what we see happening in politics and Parliament House is just a snapshot of what would be happening in so many other industries. I don't think Parliament House or politics is unique at all in this regard. I think we're hearing about it because they are the kind of stories that the public is particularly interested in, because of the role of politicians and the way Parliament is supposed to represent us as people. So we feel a particular investment in those stories. But I think we would find this across, sadly, every industry, or very, very, very many industries. And while the stories that we are hearing come out are awful, really distressing, and I think probably just the tip of the iceberg, if one good thing comes of it, I think that it is that we are at something of a moment. Feminism comes in waves. This is how it always has been from the earliest days. And we really do seem to be in a fourth wave of feminism at the moment. And when we say wave, what we mean by that is it's like an increase, a groundswell of activism, public interest, scholarly work. And it's important that people understand between the waves of feminism, you know, the first wave of feminism was back in the early 1900s when women were trying to get the right to vote. The second wave was in the 60s and 70s, and that was around a lot of bodily rights for women, so rights around domestic violence, birth control, abortion rights, those kind of things. If we are in the fourth wave at the moment, it's important that people understand that it's not that feminism goes away between those waves. It's not that people stop caring, feminists stop caring, or that feminists don't exist. It's what we'd call, it's sort of in an abeyance. It goes publicly quiet, but work is still being done behind the scenes. And it's often that work being done behind the scenes that makes things ready for society when that spark is ignited again for the next wave. That work is then built on. So I think we are in a fourth wave of feminism at the moment, given the level of public and scholarly interest and activism that we're seeing, which I think is a good and exciting thing. And hopefully it will be a wave that does lead to some really meaningful, concrete change for society.
So with this fourth wave of feminism, how has the digital media platform, has that in any way changed the way, I guess, previous generations of women have united together and took on action, now that everything is accessible through a global way of connecting? What do you see are the changes in this current wave?
I think it definitely makes it much easier for women to connect with each other, to find other women that, you know, in the past, unless you happen to meet someone, or you'd maybe read a book or an ad in a newspaper inviting you to an event, you might not know if any other women felt the same way you did or had the same concerns as you. Or even it could be something that perhaps at the time you yourself didn't care about, but then you might have gone to the event and gone, oh, actually, yeah, that does happen to me, or I do relate to that. I think now, because of the digital space so many of us exist in now, we are much more likely to find other like-minded people, people who've had similar experiences to us. So I think a number of the things we're seeing talked about in this wave of feminism are often really private issues that women may feel that they were the only one who experienced sexual harassment at work, for example, because of the shame that is unfortunately surrounded with it. So seeing other women speak publicly has given them the courage to speak out. So I think it helps women to find each other and hear from each other and hear from women who are different to them, which I think is really important. It's helped move feminism away from what has been very rightly criticized as being a very white, middle class, Western woman's approach to feminism, which excluded a lot of groups of people. So I think the digital space has helped make women who may not have always been as listened to or as considered in former waves of feminism, we're hearing from them a lot more now too. But also I think that the final area in which the digital space has helped with the way we are all experiencing feminism now is that we're hearing from things that in the past we might have considered not relevant to us, or views that we may not necessarily have agreed with, or people who live in ways we might have had a problem with. And it's easier for us to hear from them directly and go, maybe there's more to this than I thought. Maybe the opinions I had were incorrect, or maybe the way I thought about this wasn't necessarily right or fully formed. So it helps us to hear from a full range of perspectives and opinions that simply people didn't have access to in the past. And I think that's why we're seeing now more than ever so many more men, and particularly, as you said, cisgender men, being interested and sympathetic to the causes of feminism, because they're hearing from so many women who are saying, yeah, it's like this for me too, or this is the trouble that we have, or when you do this, you don't realize it makes us feel like that. They're hearing that so much more now than they would have in the past.
Do you think that this will hopefully lead to a different way that men and women will interact with each other within, say, spaces, say like the political sphere or say the education space when they come together?
I hope it helps everyone interact better with each other, whatever gender you are, that I hope it helps. First of all, I think, sadly, a lot of men, and perhaps some women too, have been surprised at some of the stories that have come out. A sense that I had no idea it was this bad. I had no idea these things were going on. So hopefully that will make people more aware of just what's going on and make them more sensitive to things that might have been going on around them that they didn't realize, or even themselves may have inadvertently been doing, not knowing that people don't like this. We might not tell you, women may not tell you, but we don't like it when you give us a shoulder rub or whatever it is. So I think it can help in that way, create an awareness. And hopefully it will create an environment in which everybody feels that they can be open about what's needed to create, a good workplace for everyone, a flourishing, productive workplace where everyone can come and bring their best selves and their true selves to the workplace and do the best work that they can, and work in a team environment in which everyone feels valued. Because just from a professional point of view, why wouldn't we want that? Why wouldn't we want people to be coming as their best true selves? Because then they're going to be the best employees. Like, we should all want that, just even if we don't care about any of the social good. From a purely crass economic point of view, why would we not make the argument for it just from that alone? Obviously, there are far more moral and ethical reasons. But I guess the point is, it's hard to find a reason not to want this to happen.
One of the things that I'm sort of passionate about is having more people coming from intersectionalities into, say, the political sphere and becoming our future leaders. What do you envisage a day where we'll be more, hopefully again, have another female Prime Minister in Australia?
I mean, I hope that's the case. I hope we have a Prime Minister who's not white. I hope we have a Prime Minister. I mean, if we could have an Indigenous Prime Minister, that would be brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant. I hope you and I are alive to see that.
Absolutely.
And certainly, yes, a Prime Minister, but just our elected representatives, if you think about the the makeup of Australia, the gender makeup of Australia, the cultural makeup of Australia, the different abilities, people with disabilities, that is still not remotely represented in our elective representatives. And that's a problem. That, these are meant to be the people that represent us and the people that bring the voices of the community to the table. So when discussions are had, we get these perspectives, that it's not just from this very narrow range of views. I think we're certainly moving in that direction. If you look at our parliament now compared to, say, 80 years ago, it's certainly improved. We do still have a long way to go, but, hopefully we're at least moving in that direction.
And as we're heading towards the end of our interview, I want to ask how sociology is going through an interesting, I guess, re-emergence at the moment. We've had a little bit of a kind of a setback in some ways in terms of the reallocation of HECS funding. How would you, in your expertise and your love of sociology, what message would you like to send to, I guess, our future students and who are wanting to study sociology? Is it worth investing that amount of money to enter this profession in 2021 and beyond?
Yeah, I think I would say, for our future students, you're in your final years of high school and maybe you're thinking, I'd really like to do an arts degree. And perhaps your parents are like, well, what's the point of that? Where's that going to take you? What about a nice, sensible job like dentistry, where there's a clear career, we know what's going to come out of that? And I guess what I would say to that is that I think we have never been more in need of people with arts degrees than we have now. We need people who know not just what to think, but how to think. People who know how to ask the next relevant questions. People who can sit with the tension of different, often competing ideas and just be able to hold them in their minds. People who bring critical thinking to public debate and discussion and the information that is put before them. Never before have we been, well, arguably, never before have we been so siloed as we are now politically and ideologically. A lot of that has to do with the algorithms of social media that we are all so much victims of. And what that means is not only are we not as often hearing from people who have different opinions to us, but we also know from previous elections, particularly in the US, the way fake news is shared and spread on social media. And for the untrained mind, it can be very difficult to be able to tell what is truth and what is fiction, what is fake news and what is real news, what's opinion and what is news. We need minds that know how to do that. And that is what you learn in an arts degree. And as I also said, ideally in an arts degree, you will also learn how to entertain views you might not necessarily agree with and be able just to sit with them and listen to them and then decide for yourself what you think, that you can hold troubling views or disparate views or contradicting views in your head and work your way through them. So, and I also think that an arts degree, more than perhaps any other degree, asks us some of the big existential questions that we are facing. And if you're worried about your future employment, the skills that you learn in an arts degree, and particularly in the humanities and social sciences, are the jobs that are least likely to be replaced by robots. The things that we learn, critical thinking, intercultural competence, communication, all of these concepts that you learn in your arts degree, these are the hardest things for AI to replace. So it's actually a really smart idea to get an arts degree because you're future-proofing yourself from an employment perspective. And lastly, what I would say is, don't also think that it needs to be one or the other, that I need to do an arts degree or a science degree or engineering or this or whatever. We need both. You can do both now. Universities can allow you to do 2 degrees or double degrees. And we see the importance of that when we see, for example, the way our incredibly clever scientists or engineers come up with clear evidence for why what we're doing is destroying the environment, for example. And yet then they are completely perplexed as to why politicians won't take on their advice. They're absolutely true evidence-backed advice. This is when you need social scientists to come in and say, okay, you've got the right information. Now we're going to tell you how to convince people to use it or to understand it. This is what the evidence shows us about how you get people to change their minds. This is what the evidence shows us about how you bring people on board with your opinions. This is why you need social sciences as well. I don't think we should be seeing it as one or the other. We need all of these skills to push society in the way that we want it to go.
That's wonderful. And hopefully our students who are listening to this will take on board some of these wonderful ideas you've mentioned. I'd just like to finally ask you, and a parting question is, what does it mean when you're now regarded as seen as one of the most influential Australian female voices? What kind of pressure does that put on you as Dr. Susan Carland?
Honestly, it's funny. I don't even think about it. And I actually think it's important that those are the kind of things we don't think about. Mm-hmm. I think when we start putting stock in those kind of lists or titles or how many followers we have on social media or anything like that, I think that's when we're headed down the wrong path. I think our commitment should always be to saying what we think is true and important and useful. And the rest of it is irrelevant. The rest of it, we have no control over that, and it's meaningless. And whether someone says you're on the most influential list or not, it doesn't actually change the veracity of what it is you're saying and what it is you're doing. So those are nice trinkets, but they're ultimately meaningless. And the most important thing is that we have a clear idea of what we stand for, who we are as people, the message we want to share, and the social good that we want to imbibe. And that's what we commit to.
Dr. Susan Carland, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your words of wisdom and just encouraging our students to keep pursuing careers in sociology.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I've loved it.
Lovely.